Drinking with Authors may contain adult content. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Drinking with Authors. I'm your host, author Nick Savage. I am drinking a wonderful, highly unalcoholic Earl Grey lavender tea. This episode, as every episode, is sponsored by Four Horsemen Publications, so give them some love over at fourhorsemenpublications.com or in any of their social medias and find yourself some good reads. But joining us is not a Four Horsemen author. I want to welcome to the show author David Bernknopf, who has written a Northern Exposure, if you remember that show, style dramedy, 2 years on another planet. Or is it Alaska? David, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I just want to begin by telling you I'm just drinking a cup of coffee, but it is in a very special mug. This is a mug that was made by Tlingit. That's a tribe in the Juneau area of Alaska, a Tlingit artist named Doug Chilton.
Doug Chilton, Tlingit, which is a tribe, I'm assuming, like native to the Alaska region before.
Yes.
Okay.
There are something like 13 different tribes in Alaska.
All things I don't know.
Things I didn't know either.
Was this just an artist who you happened upon, or did you actually become friends with this guy?
I found he was showing stuff at the annual Alaska Native Convention in Anchorage, which I was covering as a journalist, which will explain how I got there. And I saw his stuff, and it was all beautiful, and I didn't need jewelry, but I saw his beautiful whale. That's a whale, in case you can't tell. Whales and ravens, probably the two most important things to Native artists, wherever they're from. They could be from the north along the Arctic. They could be from the extreme west near Russia, or they can be in the southeast, which is where he's from, where the state capital is in Juneau.
That is wonderful. See, there's not a lot that I think the contiguous 48 staters know about Alaska. So it's always nice to learn a little bit. But you're not originally from Alaska. You got your start working for CNN.
I did. I worked at CNN doing everything from real grunt work at the very beginning. I was an original CNN employee. I started in 1980 before it even went on the air, making just above minimum wage. And when I left, I was a vice president. And in between, I had done documentaries all over the world. I'd covered politics. But then new owners came in, and I decided time to leave voluntarily before they asked me to go.
I understand. But it was your experience at CNN that took you to Alaska.
Amongst other things, I then had my own video production company. I worked in Washington, D.C. for a while for an investigative news program, which I quit because, and this is right after COVID, 2022, I quit because the show was not going to be doing as much investigative work and was going to be doing more political work, which I was done with covering politics. I used to love it, but I was done with it. And so I'm sitting at home helping friends on podcasts, doing my own little music podcast that nobody listened to. And I got a cold call asking if I wanted to go take over an investigative news unit in Alaska, which I thought was insane. I mean, I really thought, no way am I going to pack up and go to Alaska. And then the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, what else am I doing? And I talked to my kids, and I tell this story in the book. The book is a fictionalized account of my 2 years there. But there are certain elements of truth in it. And one of them was that I asked my kids, who were adults, and they were in their mid-20s, I said, would you think your dad was crazy if he packed up and went to Alaska? And they both said something like, no, it'd be the coolest thing ever. So with that vote of confidence, I said yes. And I packed up everything, having no idea really about Alaska. I had once done a travel piece there, but that's different. I didn't even realize that just to get my car there was an adventure on its own. I had to put it on a long haul trailer. They take it to Tacoma, Washington. They put it on a freighter. Whenever the freighter wants to go, it goes, because not every freighter wants to take cars. Then it gets unloaded. Then it gets shipped to a car place that specializes in taking your car. And then, a month or so later, you get your car. So it's like everything in Alaska, it just takes forever. And you do build a kind of patience there that you don't have in the lower 48.
Now, it was a 2-year stint that you did with this team. May I ask, was it like then just a contract job for the 2 years, or did you just decide that you were done?
No, they asked me before they wanted to move me up there. They asked me if I would stay 2 years. There was no contractual requirement. It was just a, handshake thing. And I didn't always know if I would make it the 2 years, but I did. And then that was enough. And the reason it was enough was because, and this is a theme of the book, there are two things. There's an aloneness in Alaska, and even amongst Alaskans, and I think they would admit this. Alaskans like their privacy. They like being in their very narrow group of friends. If you don't like that, you leave Alaska, because even in a place like Anchorage, in the winter, it can be really hard to go see somebody. It's hard enough to get to work some days because of the snow and the cold. And so you just have to be okay with that. And after a while, I missed family. I have no family there. And it is the closest place in the lower 48 is a 3-hour flight to Seattle. If you can't drive it, it takes 3 days to drive the Trans-Canada, Trans-Alaska Highway. You're there. And maybe in the summer, a couple, 3 months, people want to come visit you, but you're basically there. Now, a lot of people get worn out by the light and dark situation. You hear that a lot. People can't stand how dark it is in the winter with only 4 hours of light, maybe, or how light it is in the summer. That didn't bother me. But it did bother me that for about 5 months, you never see the roof of a building because it's just covered with snow and it never melts. That wore me out, the length of the winter.
I can understand that. Being a native Chicagoan, those winters can get brutal. You know what I'm saying? So I wouldn't even want to imagine an Alaskan winter, and it's something that I would not envy. The nights, on the other hand, the long nights kind of appealing to me, only because sunlight hurts my eyes and doubly hurts my wife. But I could understand why it would be depressing and a little anxiety ridden for other people and stuff.
We had a reporter when I got there. She had come up, I don't know, from the Midwest somewhere. And after about a month of the winter season, she asked to be allowed out of her contract, and they let her go because it was just too much for her. So it does affect people a lot. I get that. I can sleep through anything. So light, dark, I mean, I would get up, and it's not easy. I try to go to the gym 3 days a week. You get up at 5 in the morning. It's, maybe it's 10 below outside, and it's pitch black, and the roads are icy, and you just got to make yourself go, because if you don't, that's when the weather and the dark and the light really bear down on you.
Yes. Now, I know that, like, as you said, the book is a fictionalized accounting of your time doing the investigative stuff. But as much as the image you're painting isn't the happiest image of Alaska because of the dark and the snow and everything like that, the book itself is almost a dramedy or a dramatic comedy, channeling a little bit of the show Northern Exposure to an extent. Can you get into the book a little bit deeper?
Happy to. That's why I'm here, right? So I started journaling right when I got up there because I knew it would be a different experience. And as I was journaling, it occurred to me, well, maybe there's like a memoir in this. But then I thought, no, I'm going to take things that are a little bit off, a little bit unusual, and I'm going to blow them up. So, first of all, I loved the stories we covered. We did a lot of important work at a time when journalism is maybe not as valued as I think it should be. I'm proud of the stories we did. We did stories about healthcare challenges. We did stories about how COVID money was used or misused. We did stories about homelessness, which it always surprises people. One of the biggest surprises in the book, and this is true, even in the dead of winter, there are still hundreds of homeless people living outside in Alaska. How do they keep warm, you might ask? A combination of, you might not believe this, burning open propane tanks inside of a tent. Now, that is a dangerous thing, and people die every year from that. And it's difficult to get some people to agree to get off the street into an emergency shelter. Often, I learned, because they have a pet, and the shelters won't take a pet, and the pet is their only connection to humanity, you might say. And so they prefer to stay outside. Also, substance abuse issues, that's not allowed in the shelters. Some people choose not to give up their substance. So that's the drama part of it. Those kinds of stories that we covered are in the book. The comedy part of it is, and this is a true story that I exaggerated, and it gets back to the aloneness of Alaska. No one ever invited me to a Thanksgiving or a Christmas or a Super Bowl party or anything, because people just don't really have those kinds of gatherings in a big way. They get their own family for Thanksgiving maybe, but they just don't have big Thanksgivings. It's not, I'm not saying nobody does, but most people prefer the smaller gatherings. And so one Monday, back at work after Thanksgiving, one of the news anchors says to me, "Oh, what did you do for Thanksgiving this year?" And I, being honest, said, "Well, not anything. I think I cooked a frozen lasagna." And she said, "You know, we thought about inviting you." I was like, "You thought about inviting me? What? I wasn't good enough to make the list?" I was close, but it was, you were this close to being invited, but then we thought about it, and no.
Yeah, that's kind of a really strange thing to tell someone. Like, if you thought about it, they should have done it, you know?
So I think, and I exaggerate that story in the book, I think that that was certainly not meant to be mean to me. What it
Yeah.
was a reflection of, they really just don't think about stuff like that a lot because it's not what they do. And so you just have to kind of accept it. For the first time in my life, the only time in my life, I signed up for, like a dating thing online. Who am I going to get matched with in Alaska? And I didn't actually go on any dates because people who, and this is going to sound a little stuck up maybe, but you got to understand who you are, right? So like one person I got matched with, one of her personality characteristics listed was, doesn't like to read books. And I thought, well, that if you're leading with that,
That's a
you and I,
strange, yeah.
you and I are not gonna be a match. So that was a failed effort, and I make a lot of exaggerated fun of that experience because, I don't know, maybe if I'd stayed up there for another 2 years, I'd have found somebody, but
Either that or you would have stopped reading books, and then
in order to get a date, I am agreeing to burn all my books.
I have found though that it's a weird point of pride for people, because like as an author, I'll be doing signings, and like in public places or whatever, and people will be passing by and you try and engage with them, and they're like, "Oh, I don't read books." And they say it with like the sense of pride, or, "Oh, I haven't read a book since college," with this strange sense of pride that's like, that's not the brag you think it is.
Well,
That's not a flex.
Yeah, I don't understand why that would be. It's one thing if you don't like to read, you don't have time, whatever, but why you would go out of your way to pat yourself on the back over it. But, here we are. Here we are, two guys writing books, complaining about people who don't want to read them.
No, it's just it's kind of one of those things though where people find odd points of pride. It's one thing to be like, "Oh, I've never written a book," or I still haven't found my genre I like or whatever, this or that, or I'm a big fan of nonfiction, like I only like true crime or whatever it is. But to be like, I don't like reading books. There's got to be more to it than just that. You know what I'm saying? Like, but
I'll give you an
yeah.
Alaska point of pride that still surprises me. And as a journalist, I didn't want to have to cover stories about people who go out by themselves to do these very wilderness kinds of adventures. Like they drive to a spot on the side of the road, they get their cross country skis out and their poles, and they just go off into the woods by themselves. Or they kayak somewhere. And I love kayaking, and I talk about kayaking in the book, but they'll kayak by themselves. And in Alaska, if you do that by yourself and you get into trouble, you're in a lot of trouble because it might be next summer before somebody finds you if you get lost, if you break your ankle by yourself, cross country
Yeah.
skiing. If you turn over your kayak in the Gulf of Alaska, you might, it's pretty cold. You might make it to shore, but then you might freeze before anybody finds you. So, but that's a very common thing. It's Alaskans take pride in being able to do stuff by themselves. Here's a story, true story, exaggerated in the book. One day I come into work, I ask one of the reporters I work with, "What did you do this weekend?" She said, "Oh, I went flying with a friend of mine." "Oh, interesting." He said, "Yeah, I also learned how to put a propeller on a plane." And I said, "What do you mean you learned how to put a propeller on a plane?" She said, "Well, he had taken the propeller off to clean the, whatever connects the propeller to the little single engine plane. And he's asked me, he said, go over there, you see the propeller sitting on the drum, just put it on this thing and then screw it in. The screwdriver, the socket's right there." And she did it. And I said, "Come on, that is not a true story." He said, "No, it's a true story." I said, "Well, he must have checked it, right?" He said, "No, he trusted me." And we took off and we flew. And I said, "If this is a true story, I'm calling the FAA right now because that plane needs to be grounded till somebody who knows what they're doing checks it out." She goes, "You just don't get Alaskans, do you?"
I get I don't know if I would ever get in a plane with an Alaskan after hearing that story. Like, I understand DIYers, do it yourself. There's a lot that I've learned to do myself, but I don't think putting a propeller on a plane and then getting into it is going to be anything I would ever do, especially if it goes unchecked. That is a very, very strange sense of pride. But it does remind me, though, I had friends growing up who were from Kentucky, like deep Kentucky, and they would kind of have similar sense of self-reliance, because of just the isolation of where they grew up. And it's kind of, I think, what Alaskans have is a sense of self-reliance because no help is around should something bad go wrong on a
That's
major
it.
scale.
That's it.
Yeah.
Especially if you live in what are called off the road communities. And off the road communities are literally that. There's not even 800,000 people in all of Alaska. So about 100,000 of those people live what's called off the road. And that means they live in a town where no road goes to. So getting there or getting away from there requires, in most cases, a small plane to come and get you or take you away. Now, you can imagine all the things that means for healthcare, for education. These are communities, often Alaska Native communities, that may have 300, 500 people. But even a place like Nome, Alaska, everyone's heard of Nome because it's where the Iditarod ends. It was a huge gold mining town in the late 1800s or late 1900s. Nome is off the road. There's no road that goes there. So there's maybe 3,500 people who live in a town. They have a little hospital. You really would call it a clinic. They have a couple of schools. But if you have a serious medical issue, and this is a kind of story that I worked on, a plane has to come in to get you and take you to the hospital in either Fairbanks or Anchorage. There's no boat that comes to Nome. It's inland. And even if there was a boat that could get there up a river, which sometimes barges will deliver things that way, in the winter, it's impossible. It's frozen.
Yeah.
There's no way to get there. And so what happens is if you have let's say you're diagnosed with cancer and it's winter. Well, maybe it takes 2 weeks for the plane to be able to land there. And then, and this is back to the drama part, your family is pretty far from you. They may not have the money to spend much time with you while you're getting treatment. So these are the kinds of things, this is what I mean by aloneness that I talk about in the book. Like it wasn't just me being alone. It's if you have a medical emergency, you often find yourself alone. If you want to go to, you graduate from the little school in your town and you don't want to stay in that community for whatever reason, you have to really go away. You have to go to Anchorage, which is an hour flight, let's say an hour and a half flight to go to school or somewhere else. Imagine if it's Seattle or California. And your family is very rarely going to see you because chances are they don't have the money to go fly around take those kinds of trips. So it really can be a very isolated place. And think about 100,000 people living like that. And that's not even including people who just get totally off the grid and have to be able to do everything by themselves. I mean, if you live in Nome, you got to be able to fix your car, your snowmobile, which Alaskans call snow machines. You get corrected if you call it a snowmobile. You have to be able to fix your own plumbing. It might take a long time before a trained plumber comes to help fix something. So all those reality shows that you see on Discovery or whatever about people living off the grid, life is really like that for a lot of people there.
That's eye-opening because I know reality shows I take, with a grain of salt because it's a show. They want the drama, they want this and that. But as much as I'm all like DIY stuff, I'm not sure I'd want to sit there and have to fix a pipe that bursts in the middle of winter because the nearest plumber's 3 weeks out. Like that's a very as you say, lonely kind of existence to have to do all those things yourself.
But the benefit for folks like that, and I certainly appreciated this, is when I would I live less than 2 hours from my office, but I would still see the Chugach Mountains on my drive. It's beautiful. I live 15 minutes from a salt marsh boardwalk where whatever the season was, you would see beauty that is beyond compare. You would see, depending upon the season, you would see moose, you would see bear, you would see eagles all over the place. I loved watching the Arctic terns nest there. They're a beautiful bird that you don't see many other places. And then in that location, there are scores of them diving around and building their nests and having their babies. So that's a beauty that is beyond what most places have. I live in Colorado now. I came here because it's beautiful. It's triple A compared to the major leagues of Alaska. It really is.
I growing up in a big city, it's very, I can appreciate the wilderness and I I love the beauty. I love going to the, Sierra Nevadas and stuff like that and out west. And I can even appreciate Appalachian Mountains, or Appalachian, as they would say. And they are much smaller, obviously, by compare. But I've never been to Alaska, but I see the pictures, and I'm just like, there's something that I see in the pictures that even the pictures I don't think capture properly.
Yeah,
And
so Alaska has a kind of mediocre ferry system that gets you from place to place where there aren't roads. And I took the commercial, they call it the Maritime Highway, just a ferry, put your car on it. I took it from Whittier, which is a cruise ship spot that you can drive to, across to Valdez, which, as you might recall, was where the Exxon Valdez had its major oil incident, but it's also a tourist place further to the east. Just that commercial few hours on the ship, you go past gorgeous glaciers, you go past huge mountains, you see seals, you see sometimes you'll see a whale. Like, that's just everyday life there. That's just like, I'm going from Whittier to Valdez. This is how I get there. Oh, yeah, look, there's another glacier. And I don't mean to suggest that I ever got that jaded, but that's, it's unbelievable how available that beauty is. And then, for people who like to fish or hunt, it's like the best.
well, I'm not a hunter myself, but in Alaska, if the food comes on planes, you know what I'm saying, and stuff like that, like because of the isolation, do they have would they even have restrictions on hunting? Do they still have
Very
those kind of
few.
regulations?
They do have some. Now, if you're an Alaska native, almost 20% of the population is, they're exempt from a lot of those rules. Alaska natives, many of them have what's called fish camp, where once every summer they will gather with other people who have, from the tribe, who have fishing rights at a particular location. They will fish for salmon for 2 weeks or so, collect hundreds, in some cases, hundreds of salmon, which they will then salt, they will preserve, they will put in oil, and it will feed them for the year. It will provide enough salmon for the year. Different tribes, there are tribes who still subsistence existences in the Arctic or in the extreme western part of the country, of the state. It feels like a country, western part of the state, who hunt whales still and are allowed to do that with certain restrictions, who eat seal meat. So I think that was one of the biggest surprises, is how the native communities there still thrive. They still speak their own languages. It's not a thing where you have to convince the kids to pick up the language. It's not a thing where there's a reservation and you're desperately trying to somehow keep that part of life alive. In Alaska, the tribes were never put on reservations, so they still live in essentially the places where they have always lived. That's not to say that fishing rights weren't taken away from them at certain times, or if they lived near a gold strike, that they didn't get forced away from that. But compared to other indigenous peoples in North America, Alaska natives were allowed to maintain their own traditions and lifestyle, and that includes hunting and fishing.
I am assuming that in your 2 years there, the whale and seal meat aside, you were able to find yourself like a good burger once in a while.
Yeah, Anchorage is a place that, Anchorage has a Buffalo Wild Wings, it has a Walmart. But okay, so here, this is in my book. Again, it's only slightly exaggerated. I was driving to work one day, and I hear on the radio, oh, by the way, you can't get satellite radio in Alaska. Cannot receive it because it's too far north for the satellite to reach.
Oh.
So you still listen to terrestrial radio. And so I'm listening to particular independent indie music. I like it. I'm listening to the one indie station in town, and an ad comes on for a local grocery store where they're advertising, and we've got fresh halibut just in off the boat. If you buy the whole fish, it's only $9.99 a pound, and we'll cut the head off for you. So that's like Okay. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen a whole halibut. Halibut are huge. They're like the size of your desk. So a whole halibut for one person is not practical. I mean, I went in there and I go, no, I'd have had to ship halibut out of Alaska. But if you like halibut and you got a family, that's a great deal. $9.99 a pound. What does halibut cost down here? Like $40 a pound.
Oh, it's been a number of years since I've eaten fish, but yeah, it was not cheap last I remember. So yeah, and we'll cut the head off for you. It's kind of a very strange bonus to kind of get them to buy.
They wanted you to know that the $9.99 was not, you were not going to pay for the head. You were not going to pay an extra 2 pounds for the head or whatever.
Okay, so the cut the head off isn't like a nicety, like, we'll cut the head off, you get to do the rest. It was, we'll cut the head off so you're not paying for the garbage on that.
It was both of those things. It was definitely like, you don't have to fillet your own halibut here. We're gonna do something for you. When I went up there, and this is why, like, first of all, I didn't have the heart to write a real memoir. I'm sure you've interviewed people who've written memoirs. There's a certain, because you have to be honest about it or else it's pointless. I felt like some of what I would write would come across cruel, because at some point you're making fun of people you cover, perhaps, or people you work with. And I didn't have that in me. So by fictionalizing it all and exaggerating it, it's just me taking things and making fun of them for sure, but I'm not being cruel towards any individual.
No, because you do fictionalize the situation, and kind of in the exaggeration of it all kind of softens whatever blow might be dealt to someone who goes, wait, that was me, type stuff, which is nice.
Do you think memoirs? What's your reaction to my thought that a memoir might be too cruel? To quote Louis Farrakhan, of all people, he once said that terrorism is like beauty; it's in the eye of the beholder. And what I mean by that in this regard is that a memoir needs to be honest, and if writing it seems like it might come across as cruel, then either the situation is being written from a viewpoint that might not be, I don't want to say rose-colored glasses, but as 2020, you know what I'm saying, hindsight, or it just might be the way that life played out. Like, I don't think people are cruel by nature, but I think things happen and people make mistakes sometimes, but a memoir needs to be honest. And if it comes across as cruel, it either needs to be tempered while still being honest, or left as is and let the reader decide. Well, it's interesting because I spent my whole life trying to follow facts and data, truth, whatever that may be, however anyone wants to identify that. And so I never really thought about cruelty very much in my career, because I felt like these are important things for people to know. They rise to a level of, we're doing a story on it, and sometimes it will be certainly negative, if not cruel. That's certainly the nature of investigative work, is sometimes people come across in a bad way. I had one guy get very mad at me and threaten to sue me and say I've ruined his charity, but it turned out his charity wasn't really a charity, and nobody ever sued me in my whole career. So I wear that as a real badge of honor. But then I didn't know if I could write fiction. I'd never tried it before, and somehow at this late stage of my career, writing fiction just became something I wanted to do. And I guess because I wrote so much in my life, the writing part wasn't difficult. Now the plotting, and I didn't know, I had never tried to write a funny line in my life. It's one thing if you're sitting around having a scotch with your friends at the bar and you say something and everybody laughs. Great, you're a funny guy. But writing something down that removed from that environment that makes somebody laugh, I had no idea if I could do that. And I didn't know if I had done it until at least some nice people read the book and said, oh, this part made me laugh, or I like that, it made me laugh. So that's been the greatest part of this, has been if somebody says I made them laugh with something.
I think writing comedy for the written word versus writing comedy to be performed, whether on stage or screen, are two very different kind of mindsets, because the way that they play out and they time and stuff like that. And when writing it, at least in my opinion, it needs to have that organic, kind of feel to it, where especially when you're taking, a real life situation like you did and fictionalizing it and stuff, a lot of that stuff that happened in real life that was funny will translate and be even more so as it becomes exaggerated and fictionalized. So I think that you did following your instinct on that and then having people verify that was definitely the way to go,
But I just read Margot's Got Money Troubles, which was made into an Apple TV series. I don't know if you've read it. It's very funny. My daughter recommended it. It was a bestseller. I was jealous when I got done reading it, because what you described is present from the beginning to the end. It's this organic, conversational, written humor, except like times 100 what I did. So, I feel like there's a few good laughs in my book. But then when you read something that's really funny, you go, okay, well, that's something to aim for next time.
I also grew up, though, in terms of like what journalism I read growing up. I read like Dave Barry, who was, a satirist and satirist.
Miami.
I'm just going to make out that pronunciation. And so that to me was where I learned written comedy. You know what I'm saying? Was satire, and it kind of works, even in fictional, works of fiction and stuff like that. So I think taking your journalism skills, it translates. It translates. The hardest part, as you discovered, is plotting.
Yeah, you find that, gosh, this doesn't make sense based on what I wrote 30,000 words ago. And it takes a lot, certainly for me, it took a lot of rewriting to catch all those things.
Having a good developmental editor helps, but sans, having one of those available, especially with what the internet may have been like in Alaska, if that's where you started writing, or what's available around you in Colorado now, rewriting is definitely the process that everyone finds themselves going through. So, yeah.
I did have a developmental editor. Her first thought was, why isn't this a memoir?
Her first thought was your first thought as to why it wasn't a memoir.
Right. Oops, I can't hear you.
Having a little bit of difficulty for a second. Can pause if it's yeah, sorry about that, folks. Had a momentary technical difficulty. But no, the fictional world is definitely
come up.
Oh, I know, right? No, we don't have to deal with that in the digital age. I'm sure you had your fair share of those on CNN when they started broadcasting. Yeah. I remember, though, growing up having the off air, on some of the smaller channels and stuff. Especially when
CNN started, nobody thought we could keep going for 24 hours, 7 days a week. Nobody. I don't even think we thought we could do it. So now it seems kind of laughable.
But you dreamt big and they accomplished it. And what the 24-hour news cycle has done for the news and the world is, debatable, but they had a dream, they set out, and they accomplished it for better or worse. But
we'll leave that for the next podcast.
Yeah, exactly. For everyone listening, though, they're going to want to know, because they've listened, they've stayed on, and they want to know more about your journeys in Alaska. So give us the shameless self-promotion where we can find you online and buy your books and all that jazz.
The book is available everywhere books are sold online. It's places I didn't even know existed. But I also have a website for people who want to read more, some excerpts from the book, and they can also get a autographed copy. It's 2yearsbook.com. That's TWOYEARSBOOK.com, 2yearsbook.com. Yeah, there's a lot of photos also that I took up there. Every photo on that website is a picture I took in Alaska because it's so beautiful.
And if anyone looking at the site wants to license those pictures, contact you, I'm assuming.
I would love that. I have very low licensing fees.
Hey,
Unlike everybody
it's,
else these days.
oh, I know. It's insane trying to get licensing fees for some things and stuff. But no, but I appreciate your time and joining us and sharing everything you did about Alaska, your time there, and everything about your book, 2 Years on Another Planet, or is it Alaska, by David Bernknopf. Did I say it right again?
You did. You get an
Thank
A.
you. Thank you so much. For everyone who has joined us, thank you so much. Don't forget to follow him, buy his book, give him some love, read a nice, funny, fictionalized encounter of his time up there, and follow, like, share the podcast as well, Drinking with Authors. And if you know any sponsors, send them our way. Until next time, everyone, remember, it costs nothing to be kind. So be good.
Thank you for listening to Drinking with Authors. Join us next time for another fun conversation with an author over drinks.